So before I start, I apologize for sounding sick. I am sick, and I'm filming a few videos today, so you'll probably hear me apologize in multiple videos because it's just the way I sound, and I don't know if everybody's going to be watching all of them, so I want to warn in advance. Yes, I have a cold. I'm getting over it. I feel much better than I did the past couple days, but still definitely sound like I'm sick and feel it a little bit. So anyway, that's a thing. Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing my May wrap-up. In May, I ended up participating in the 1900 to 1950 readathon, hosted by Katie from Books and Things. And I had a really successful reading month. I read a lot of really enjoyable books. Not all of them were like 5-star reads, but I did really enjoy most of them. We're just gonna chat about them, so let's get into this. So the first book I completed for the month was All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Remarque. I always forget his name, but this I ended up giving 4 out of 5 stars. It may be slightly below a 4-star read, just as far as my personal enjoyment, but I gave it 4 stars because honestly, it is a very well written book. This is a story following Paul Bäumer, who is a German soldier in World War I, and it's basically just following him and his friends, his group of friends, as they fight in the war. And it's a really powerful story. It's a powerful exploration of how not only difficult war is, but also how honestly unnecessary it is. How the soldiers feel like they're just fighting just to fight, and they don't have the same, reason for fighting that the higher-ups do within the government, and just how scary it is and how much it changes you, not just like physically as far as physical injuries, but how much it changes your psychological ability to live life the way you did before. And I feel like it just is such a well-done book. It is a translated work. It was originally written in German, so keep that in mind. But I did feel like this translation did a decent job. I mean, obviously I don't speak German, so I wouldn't be able to know for sure, but I felt engaged in the story. I felt like the characters, despite how short it was, I felt like I really came to know the characters. I felt for them a lot. The only reason it's not like a 5 stars, really why in some ways I would put it slightly below a 4 stars, is just because of my personal preference. I wish it was longer in some ways. I also wish it had explored the home front a little bit more. I feel like when it comes to war fiction, I have a little bit more appreciation for more of a home front setting, whether that be spies who are kind of working within the home front of the enemy territory a little bit, if that makes sense. Like, I just want to be able to see how it's impacting everyone, not just the soldiers themselves. I also feel like I really like to see more how it affects the women, how war affects the women, and this one really just focused on the soldiers, which again isn't a bad thing. It's just for my personal preference, I do prefer that a little bit more when it comes to war stories. So just because of that, I just wasn't as enthralled by this as I otherwise might have been, but again, it was a really well-written work and one that I did enjoy a lot. Up next, I took a little bit of a break from classics because at the end of April, I had read a couple of classics, and then I had read that, and on my audiobook I was listening to another classic, and so I just needed a little something else right in the middle, and I ended up picking up Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is a recent release about Ariadne from Greek mythology. Ariadne is the daughter of Minos, who is a king of this land. I think it was Crete. Yes, of Crete. And he's the one who, his wife gives birth to the Minotaur, and he has the labyrinth created by Daedalus. And Ariadne actually helps Theseus, the Greek hero, defeat the Minotaur, and then sets sail with him only to be betrayed by him. And so we follow her, and then we also end up later on following her sister Phaedra. I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. It was really good. It was very interesting. I just had a tendency to compare it to Circe by Madeline Miller, which is one of my favorite books. I thought that was a wonderful exploration of Greek mythology, and so when I went into this, I kind of expected something a little bit more like that. Not exactly the same. I knew it's a different author, obviously, and a different story, but I did, kind of want something similar to that, and so it was easy to compare the two, and I could definitely tell this was a debut novel. The characters were just not as well explored as Circe is in Circe. I felt like this needed to be a little bit longer to explore those characters more in depth. I did feel like there was a lot more telling rather than showing, beginning, and I felt like I just didn't really get to know the characters as well. I did like Ariadne a lot as a character, and I liked her sister Phaedra as well, and I feel like Phaedra's plotline is a little more exciting than Ariadne's, but I did feel like we didn't really get to know Phaedra on as deep a level as I would have liked to. I also feel like this is sold as a book about sisters, which it is, but I didn't really feel like I ever got the chance to appreciate their relationship as sisters. Like, they just kind of, I don't know, I just never really felt connected with their relationship and never really felt that they had a strong relationship. They just kind of, yeah, they're sisters. And they say that they love each other, but we're never really able to see that, I felt like. We don't have enough time to. And so I honestly think there just needed to be a lot more development. I also felt like there was a little bit of an insta-love problem, which kind of ends up resolving itself in the fact that it doesn't work out necessarily the way you would expect it to. And so that helped, but it also felt very strange because, I don't know, Ariadne just felt very juvenile in the beginning because of this insta-love moment. And I didn't really appreciate that, especially because she's supposed to be the older sister. She's taken on a lot of responsibilities because her mom is falling apart. So you would think that even if she's kind of young still, she would be a little bit more mature because she's having to be more mature in a lot of ways. And so it just felt a little strange. And yeah, I just didn't love it as much. I do feel like, though, if you didn't love Circe because you felt like it was kind of boring because it was too character driven, you might like this better. This one's a little bit more plot heavy than Circe is. It is still a character focused story, but I feel like there's a little bit more plot going on in this than in Circe. So if that was an issue for you in Circe, but you want to try something like it, you might want to pick this up, but I do think Circe's better, and I couldn't help but compare them a little bit. That being said, I still gave it 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it, and I would be willing to read more from Jennifer Saint in the future. Okay, up next, going back into 1900 to 1950, we have A Room with a View by EM Forster. Sorry, it's white, so the lighting's gonna be a little weird on it. I'll do my best to hold it maybe like that to help. But anyway, I ended up giving this one also 4 out of 5 stars. It was really, really, really good. I think I would say this one's also slightly below a 4 stars, maybe a 3.75, along with All Quiet on the Western Front. But I did really enjoy it. In this, we follow Lucy Honeychurch, who is on a trip to Italy with her, I believe it's like a godmother, or maybe, no, it's a cousin, who's kind of there to watch after her, make sure her reputation isn't getting damaged and that she's being, you know, responsible and good. But she's on this trip to Italy and she ends up meeting this young man who she develops feelings for, and things continue on from there. And it's a really beautifully written book. It is a wonderful exploration of Italy. It made me want to go to Italy so bad just reading this. Between this and then watching some of Jennifer's videos about Italy recently, Jennifer Brooks, I just really want to go to Italy. But I found a compromise by eating some Italian food earlier this month with my sister, so that was very nice. But anyway, I liked a lot about this. I found it to be a very entertaining, sweet love story, but I felt like I barely knew the male love interest, to be honest. He wasn't really on page very much, first of all. Second of all, I feel like EM Forster's writing style is just, I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't quite compute for me all the time. Like, it's really hard for me to follow sometimes. I feel like sometimes he jumps in time and there's not really strong transitions. I feel like sometimes it's hard to follow who's speaking, especially in the beginning when I didn't know who anyone was. I felt like all these different ladies were speaking and I really struggled to follow who was who and what was going on. And I think that also hindered my ability to really connect with George, the male love interest, because I just felt like I didn't understand what his motives were. I struggled to really grasp the characterization of him. I mean, I did eventually. It's not like by the end I didn't know him at all. I just didn't feel like I knew him as well as I would have liked to. In fact, there's this other guy who's kind of, you know, adding a speed bump that I felt like I knew better than I knew George. And so I felt like that was just hard to really get into. It was hard to really care about their relationship when I barely felt like I knew him. It is one I'd reread in the future and maybe feel a little bit closer with him. I do want to see the film adaptation at some point. but we'll see when that's gonna happen. But it is one that I did really enjoy, and like I said, I gave it pretty much 3.75 stars, but on Goodreads I rounded it up to 4, so there's that one. Okay, and then we move into towards the end of the month, the second half of the month, and I had straight 5 stars across this board. This first one I'm going to mention is maybe similar to the others, just, you know, a grade point higher, if that makes sense. I would probably give this more like a 4.75 stars. I just rounded up to 5 in Goodreads, but that is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This is a wonderful story about an African-American woman who essentially wants to find love. She wants to get married and be in love with the person she's married with, and we follow her through 3 separate marriages and just how they go. And it's a really, really powerful story, not only about race, but also about colorism and about women's experience, specifically African-American women's experience within marriage, especially during this time. There was kind of a common culture of marital abuse during this time where men were expected to hit their wives. And so it explores that idea, and it also explores just the idea of love and what love means, and I just really like it. Honestly, I'm a sucker for books about marriage, no matter what culture they're a part of. I find them fascinating. I don't know why. I just feel like marriage is something that seems simple but can be really complex, because that's a lot of time to be with one person and having to deal with each other, especially if you start off not really knowing each other or not being in love and it's an arranged marriage, or it's just a marriage of convenience, whatever be the case. And so I just always find that really fascinating. But I also really liked Janie as a main character. I found her to be very interesting. I loved how you could tell she thought a lot about everything going on around her. She wasn't in the dark about how unfortunate some of her circumstances were. I appreciate characters who are able to recognize things for what they are when they're wrong, who maybe don't always speak up, maybe are willing to be quiet sometimes, just so that they can have time to really understand the situation before they jump into fighting back. And I feel like she does a really good job of that, and it makes her seem just so strong because she puts up with so much, and then she's willing to fight back when she knows the time has come that she needs to say something. And then by the end, she just becomes this really independent woman who does not care what other people think, who's reached a point where she knows what happiness is and she doesn't care what other people expect from her. And I just really appreciate that strength that's in her, that honestly integrity that's in her, of her just being like, you know what? I know what I want, I know what I believe in, and I'm going to stick with that. And I just really appreciate that about her. I did read The Color Purple earlier this year and really loved that, but I think between the two, I think this one's actually my favorite. I feel like they have a few similar themes within them, but I do feel like this one just hit the right notes for me personally. I did still love The Color Purple. That was another one that I rounded up to 5 stars on Goodreads and really enjoyed, but I do think this one spoke a little bit more to me and my desires in a book, and it's one that I definitely recommend if you haven't read it already. And then we have the star of the month, probably the star of the year, that I just absolutely loved. Solid 5 out of 5 stars for this one. That is The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. This is a wonderful book about society in New York. In it, we follow Lily Bart, who is just this fierce and cunning and kind of manipulative, but also caring underneath it all, woman who actually is an orphan, and she's being raised by her, I want to say it's her great aunt, ? But she just loves to live the high life. She has inherited from her mother this desire to live this grand, dramatic lifestyle. She loves to spend money. She spends a lot of it, but she doesn't have that much, and so it ends up putting her in a pickle in many, many ways. She's also in her late 20s, which means she's on her way to becoming a spinster, but she's still considered very beautiful. She's still considered a very attractive candidate for marriage, but she is running out of time, and considering how much money she spends, the only way as a woman she can really get that money is to marry, and she tries to find a way around it, but struggles quite a bit. And basically throughout the book, she falls lower and lower in society, and it's a satire. There's a lot of things that are kind of humorous about it because it's just ridiculous, like just how much money she spends and how much she feels the need to live this high lifestyle that she can't afford, and how much she looks down on people who live within their means. And it's humorous in many ways because of that ridiculousness, but by the end you honestly feel so sorry for where she ends up. And it's a wonderfully put together book. It's a wonderfully written book. There's so many interesting characters that add different dimensions to this story, and I was honestly engaged throughout the whole thing. I really, really, really loved this book. I'm thinking about doing a thematic ramble about it just to go more in depth on my feelings. Let me know if you'd like to see that. I don't know. It's hard right now. I really want to do it, but I have a lot of other videos I have planned for the next couple of months, so I'm not really sure where I can fit it in is the only problem. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I did really, really love this book. And then the last book I finished this month, which is slightly lower in my rating than House of Mirth, but it's still a pretty solid 5 stars, and that is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. This was a fabulous, fabulous book. I bet he read this with Anne from Travel Beyond Pages. I will link her Instagram down below if you're curious. She does lovely work. This is a story following Pip, who is an orphan. He's being raised by his sister and his very kind brother-in-law. Unfortunately, his sister does not treat him very well, but over time he ends up meeting different individuals who end up providing him with a new life full of great expectations between money and other opportunities. And because of this, he ends up leaving his old friends behind, treating them very badly in search of living up to these expectations. So I really, really enjoyed this. There was a portion about a quarter of the way through, like the second quarter of the book, that I really slogged through a lot. Unfortunately, I really struggled with that portion, but the rest of the book was very engaging. I was kind of surprised by how engaged I was in it. I found Miss Havisham, who I'm sure many of you have heard of, even if you haven't read this book, who is in her old wedding dress with her old wedding cake just falling apart in the next room. She's just crazy and nutty and also wonderful. I absolutely loved reading about her. Estella, her relationship with Estella is just very fascinating to me. I really loved it. We also have Magwitch, who I'm not going to specify who that is, but he is a wonderful, wonderful character who has a very interesting relationship with Pip as the book goes on. And I really found Charles Dickens' writing style to be pretty enchanting. I wouldn't say he's a new favorite. I don't think Charles Dickens will ever be a favorite author of mine. I just feel like his writing, while I enjoy it, it can be a little long-winded in a way that I don't particularly appreciate, but I did really enjoy this one, and I look forward to continuing with Charles Dickens just to see if there are other books by him that I'll also enjoy, but yes, definitely really loved that. And then the last book I want to mention really quick is one that I was kind of working on throughout the month. I'm listening to the audiobook of it, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I think at this point I'd give it a 4 stars, so it's not like a 5-star read, but it is one I'm really enjoying, and I hopefully will finish, if not by the end of June, hopefully in July. But that is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I am pretty close to the end-ish. I am currently listening to an audiobook for Ancients-a-thon, so I kind of have taken a break from this, but that audiobook is only a few hours, so I should be able to finish it pretty quickly, and then I'll move back into this and hopefully, like I said, finish it by the end of June. But I am enjoying it. Not loving it, but I am glad that I'm reading it, and there are things I really do like about it. So definitely not a slog or anything, definitely not one I wish I wasn't reading, but definitely not a favorite either. And I don't think the ending is gonna change my mind on that. I don't know, maybe, but I kind of doubt it. So anyway, but that is also one I'm working on still. And that is it for my wrap up. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, what your thoughts were on them, as I would love to know, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.